To fly into the face of the enemy in a large, slow-flying craft, to brave a torrent of anti-aircraft fire and swarms of marauding fighter planes. To do all of this after a long and tiring flight, hundreds of miles from home base, knowing that you had to fight your way back over the same ground. This was the gauntlet that awaited the crew of an Allied bomber in World War II. 10 men in an aluminum cigar, a skeleton of ribs covered with a metal skin so thin you could cut it with a knife. 10 men who knew that once in the air, they had only each other to count on. That men would allow themselves to be put in this vulnerable position for mission after mission seems unbelievable. And yet they did. On the evening of July 31st, 1943, Major General Louis Brereton, commander of the 9th Air Force at Benghazi, Libya, gives his men their final briefing on tomorrow's mission, Ploiesti, Romania. Even if none of you return, this mission will be well worth it if you are able to hit the target. German armies on the Russian front and those fighting our own troops in Italy are almost entirely dependent upon Romanian oil. The sudden, complete, and permanent denial of Romanian oil will inevitably result in the collapse of German hopes for success. You have been assigned a task that could not be accomplished by a dozen ground divisions in a period of months. No more important task has ever been assigned one striking force. These men have just been told, in the truest sense of the word, that they are expendable. Colonel John Riley Kane, Killer Kane to his men, is commander of the 98th Bombardment Group, the Pyramiders. Tonight, Kane's group consists of 46 aircraft, 460 crewmen. To his men, Kane seems hard and pragmatic. For this mission, he has canceled orders that would allow some of his battle-weary crewmen to return home. In the 98th, his popularity is not running high. In his diary, Kane writes, "Whether we die in the near future or years later from senility matters not in the great scheme of things. Yet the manner of our dying could have far-reaching effects. I have a young son I may never see again, yet I shall be content if I feel that his freedom is assured." Lieutenant John Palm is a pilot with the 376th Bombardment Group, the Liberators, commanded by Major K.K. Compton. Palm has strong misgivings about the mission they are to fly, as do most of the pilots. The standard doctrine of the Air Force, drilled into pilots from the first days of training, is that precision bombing from high altitude is the safest and most effective way to damage the enemy. But for the last 2 to 3 weeks, the pilots have been training to attack at extreme low level. John Palm has been told that this will permit a surprise attack. But how can an attack that must traverse 300 miles of enemy territory remain a surprise? Lieutenant Colonel Addison E. Baker is the tall, lanky group commander of the 93rd, known as the Traveling Circus. He and Major John Jerstad, co-pilot, will lead one of the most high-spirited bombardment groups in the Army Air Force. Baker, a stiff, proud man, has recently been promoted to replace the popular former commander of the 93rd. Baker has been suffering all the suspicion and quiet resentment of one who replaces a beloved commander. In a pre-flight briefing, Baker tells his men that they are going on one of the biggest jobs of the war. When a challenge comes from the back of the room asking what will happen if his plane doesn't make the target, Baker replies that he will lead them to Ploiesti even if his plane falls apart. At the maintenance sheds, old shot-up bombers are refitted and renewed in record time. Extra fuel tanks are installed and the planes are loaded with 3,100 gallons of gasoline and more than 2 tons of bombs. The takeoff weight of each B24 will exceed maximum load allowance. It will be a challenge just to get off the ground. John Palm is informed that he will fly a B-24 named Brewery Wagon, infamous within the bomb group as a hoodoo plane, a jinxed ship that usually comes back badly shot up. And so Palm, before boarding, defiantly throws a number of small stones at the aircraft to chase the bad luck away. None of his crew laugh. It all makes perfect sense to them. One by one, they board. At 6 a.m., the engines roar to life. The props turn and Palm guides his Liberator into line with the rest of the Liberandos. They will lead 5 groups of bombers in today's attack. At 7 a.m., the planes start to take off. The overloaded bombers roll down the runway and struggle into the air. Addison Baker's traveling circus will be the second group. Baker will lead, flying his personal plane, Hell's Wench. With him, co-pilot John Jerstad and 8 others. The third group is the 98, the Pyramiders. Their leader, John Riley Kane. Killer Kane's plane has been newly christened Hail Columbia, especially for this raid. Following the Pyramiders are the 8 Balls of the 44th and the Sky Scorpions of the 389th. As the last planes in each group prepare to take off at 2-minute intervals, those that are already airborne circle at 2,000 feet, waiting to form up. Altogether, the attack force includes 178 planes, 1,765 men. Not all takeoffs go smoothly. Kane and the crew of Hail Columbia watch as one of the Pyramider ships crashes on takeoff. An ugly black tower of smoke fills the air, the disaster clearly visible to the other bomb groups. At last, with all planes airborne, Operation Tidal Wave is on its way. Operation Tidal Wave was devised to make the theory of strategic bombing work in practice. Bomb the railroads, the factories, the fuel refineries that feed the war effort, and you will starve the enemy of the ability to wage war. That was the theory of strategic bombing, but all attempts to prove it thus far have been inconclusive. The German industries are reasonably diversified, and some are unreachable, too far for even the longest-range Allied aircraft. The goal was to find one industry so concentrated and essential that a single strike could materially affect the entire war effort. Finally, at Ploiesti, Romania, the Allied command believes they have found the answer: oil. According to estimates, a few square miles of wells and refineries around Ploiesti provided the Third Reich with nearly half its petroleum supplies. It was possibly the most important single target in Europe. There was one problem. Ploiesti was too far from bomber bases in England. The Germans knew this as well as the Allies. But now in August of 1943, long-range bombers might just make it from newly taken bases in North Africa. Early intelligence reports suggest that Ploiesti is only lightly defended. Still, the mission will be fraught with potential pitfalls. Most of the flight is over enemy territory. And since the mission is too long for fighters, the bombers will have to fly unescorted. If the Germans know they are coming, fighters could attack the bombers all the way to the target. It's possible that no one will return. Secrecy is all important. If ever there was a mission that was conceived and prepared from the top down, Ploiesti is it. Within U.S. Air Corps Commander Hap Arnold's advisory council, the man who did most of the work was a former fighter pilot, Colonel Jacob Smart. What Smart came up with was as bold as it was unconventional. He thought he could beat the odds by reversing traditional American tactics, by flying a few hundred feet off the ground to evade radar and other spotters who would be looking for traditional high-level flights. Bomber crews might achieve both surprise and unheard-of precision of attack. The B-24 was unsuited to low-level attack, but it was the longest-range bomber in the Air Force inventory. And Smart had considerable faith in the abilities of the highly trained Liberator pilots. At low level, the bombers could be a difficult target for anti-aircraft gunners. With enough low-level practice, they might bomb with even greater accuracy than at high level. However, when the pilots learned of the tactics, they had serious reservations. In fact, their commander sent a letter of protest on their behalf. It was ignored. But Colonel Smart was so confident of the mission's success that he planned on flying it himself. Hours before takeoff, however, Smart and his operations officer received word from Washington that because of their knowledge of Allied secrets, they would not be permitted to lead the mission. As a result, the principal planners, the men who knew the elaborate details of the mission better than anyone, would be forced to remain on the ground. The mission will be a huge gamble, and every one of the crewmen aboard the 178 Liberators knows it. The first 3 hours of flight are over water. To keep the attack a complete surprise, a strict radio silence has been ordered. Although each group of bombers is supposed to keep within 500 yards of each other, the battle-scarred planes of Killer Kane's 98th Bomb Group aren't able to keep up with the leaders. Soon, the groups become separated. As the mission nears the island of Corfu, where it will turn inland, John Palm and crew in Brewery Wagon watch a startling and inexplicable tragedy befall the mission's lead plane, Wingo Wango. Without warning, it begins to lose control. Then it rolls over and plummets into the sea. Following orders, there has been no distress call on the radio. There are also no parachutes. Wingo Wango had carried the lead navigator, the single most important person on the mission. At the head of the formation, there is confusion. Radio silence remains strictly in force. K.K. Compton, commander of the Liberando, slips over into the first section, but does not take the lead position. Instead, as John Palm and co-pilot Bill Love settle into the lead, they both know what the other is thinking. Brewery Wagon, the bad luck plane, is now leading the entire attack force. 19-year-old William M. Wright, an inexperienced second lieutenant, is now mission navigator. Just before the final run on Ploiesti, the navigator must identify 3 critical initial points called IPs. Each is several miles apart. The last IP will mark the final 90-degree turn to the target. It is now up to Palm and Will Wright to do the job. At 12:20 p.m., having made landfall on the Albanian coast, the first 2 bomber groups are approaching high mountains. The Liberandos and the traveling circus are now so far ahead of Killer Kane's pyramiders and the other 2 groups that they cannot see them at all. Sitting atop the approaching mountains are fantastic tiers of cumulus clouds, rising 4,000 to 6,000 feet over the highest peaks. Adding to the confusion, K.K. Compton now decides to take control of the formation. He wags his wings and begins to climb. John Palm and the rest of the Liberandos have no choice but to follow. Behind the Liberandos, Addison Baker in Hell's Wench leads the traveling circus. He's aware that if Killer Kane and the following groups, now out of visual contact, elect to fly through the clouds instead of following the lead formation over them, they may hit harder weather and end up even farther behind when they get out on the other side. If they could only speak over the radio, this could all be straightened out in a second. But without communication, there is nothing for Baker to do but follow the Liberandos to the higher altitude. What no one knows is that radio silence has been useless from the start. The Germans have broken the 9th Air Force radio code and are reading any transmissions they manage to intercept. After takeoff, a single essential message was relayed by Allied command to all friendly forces, saying only that a large force of American bombers was airborne from Libya. The Luftwaffe has intercepted, translated, and relayed this message to all Axis forces in the area. Although the Germans don't know the destination, they know that a large operation is afoot. A German ship has reported the force over the ocean, and a spotter on Corfu has seen them as well. And as they climb to higher altitude across the mountains, the entire force becomes visible on German radar. For all intents and purposes, the Germans have successfully tracked the Allied raiders from the moment they were airborne. Meanwhile, Killer Kane in Hale, Columbia, and the remaining bomber groups approach the mountains. Kane elects to go through the clouds, clearing the mountaintops by less than 3,000 feet. But he is falling even further behind. More than 60 miles ahead of them, John Palm and Brewery Wagon zigzag slowly down the foothills southwest of Belgrade and over the farms and rolling plains that lead to the Danube River. It is here that the 5 groups are to form up for the low-level run across the Balkan plains to the 3 IPs and the final turn on Ploiesti. But no one knows where Kane is. He could be irretrievably lost. The Liberandos and traveling circus are right on time as briefed. William Wright, navigator of Brewery Wagon, sets the course, and John Palm turns as directed, leading the way toward the target. The huge, awkward B24s, designed for operation at 20,000 feet, are now flying a mere 500 feet off the ground. The descent to low level has created the first real concern at Luftwaffe headquarters all day. The Liberandos and traveling circus are now below mountain-sided radar installations. They have, in effect, dropped off the map. The Luftwaffe has been growing more and more certain that Ploiesti is indeed the target, but other targets are still possible. The Germans are convinced it would be futile to attack Ploiesti. For over a year, extensive preparations have been made for the defense of this valuable asset. Allied estimates are wrong. Ploiesti is one of the most thoroughly defended targets in all of Europe. Commanding the Ploiesti defenses is Luftwaffe General Alfred Gerstenberg. In the early days of the war, he had predicted Ploiesti would be an important target and has worked like a driven man with only one goal in mind: to make Ploiesti too costly for the enemy to attack. Ploiesti's defenses form circles within circles. Within close range of the refineries are dozens of flak gun emplacements. Outside the city and refineries is another ring of guns. Here, among the myriad cables of 100 tethered barrage balloons, are emplacements of 20 and 37 millimeter rapid-firing cannon. Hundreds of them. Some are visible on the ground. Others are perched in flak towers or cleverly disguised. Outside this circle are 40 more 80 millimeter gun emplacements. Positioned as they are on both sides of a valley that leads to Ploiesti, they form a gauntlet that must be run in order to reach the target. 20 miles to the east lies Miesel, the principal Luftwaffe base. Here and at other bases nearby are a total of 108 armed aircraft ready for combat. One fighter pilot at Miesel is Hauptmann Wilhelm Steinmann, called Uncle Willie because of his old age. He's 30. At Miesel this Sunday morning, the pilots are confined to base, alerted that the Americans may be coming. But there have been no reports from the field for some time. Barely more than 50 miles away, an American navigator has questions about their location as well. The Liberators and Traveling Circus have passed their first IP, a minor town called Ploiesti. The two succeeding IPs are progressively smaller and more difficult to spot. Flying low and fast, this land is a navigator's nightmare. Young Will Wright, navigating Brewery Wagon, checks and rechecks. They should be coming up on the second IP at any moment. Behind the first group, Addison Baker leads the Traveling Circus in Hell's Wench. Crew members can feel the collective excitement rising. They are so close to the target and have not yet been attacked. This is going to work. Maybe the doomsayers were wrong after all. And then the unexpected happens. K.K. Compton's Liberator, which has followed Brewery Wagon placidly since crossing the Danube, suddenly starts to turn on its own to the right. Just ahead of Compton, John Palm is taken completely by surprise. Palm's navigator, Will Wright, tells him that Compton is making a wrong turn. Palm considers. The B-24s are squeezed together so tightly that once one plane turns, the others are virtually required to turn with them. But Palm is in the leading line of bombers opposite Compton. He doesn't have to turn. Should he follow his commander or trust his 19-year-old navigator? Wright tells him that he's going to try to salvage a course to Ploiesti. Palm agrees. That's it. The die is cast. They will go with whatever Will Wright says. John Palm takes the heading Wright gives him and sets Brewery Wagon's course straight towards Ploiesti alone. Just as his ship leaves the group, radio silence is broken with protests from other pilots behind, confirming that the entire bomb group believes Compton has made a wrong turn. But Compton continues on the new heading without response, and the remaining aircraft are forced to follow. Palm hugs the ground as he flies away from the rest of the Liberators. In a moment, the others are lost from view. If they have to, Palm and his crew will bomb Ploiesti by themselves. Behind, the long formation of bombers continues the wrong turn. Following Compton at the head of the Traveling Circus, Addison Baker is caught in the turn as well. His navigator figures that the new heading will take them straight to Bucharest, only 70 miles away. They will miss Ploiesti entirely. Over and over in briefings, the importance of this mission had been stressed. There would never be another chance to hit Ploiesti with such surprise. Now that they are so close, the thought of failure is unbearable. The entire force continues on for several minutes. Finally, those watching to the left of the bombers can just make out rows of tall smokestacks on the horizon. It is Ploiesti. They're way off course. Baker now has concrete evidence that they are going the wrong way. He attempts to rectify the situation as best he can. One officer in a following plane later said, "There was no doubt about Colonel Baker's decision. He maneuvered our group more eloquently than if he had radio contact with each of us. He turned left 90 degrees. We all turned with him. Ploiesti was off there to the left, and we were going straight into it. And we were going fast." At the Luftwaffe's headquarters, a spotter phones in a report from near the Danube. Many big bombers heading toward Bucharest. The Germans decide to split their forces. The Romanian fighters at the other bases can protect Bucharest, but all the Messerschmitts at Miesel will be reserved to defend Ploiesti. The word is given, and the planes take to the air. Meanwhile, Addison Baker in Hell's Wench is leading the Traveling Circus on the final run. They are coming in from an unfamiliar direction. There is no way they can bomb the specific targets for which they were briefed, but they're determined to find a way to hit something of value. At Miesel, Willie Steinman has just taken off. Other spotters are calling now with news that the Americans are attacking both Bucharest and Ploiesti. The Germans assume the Americans have cleverly sent planes to tie up fighters at Bucharest, while the main force attacks the source of German oil. "20 miles from Steinman's Messerschmitts, Baker is leading the traveling circus to Ploiesti, just as he said he would. They are 34 planes strong. Baker flies Hell's winch lower. The rest of the bomb group matches altitude, tightening their formation. Hurtling along at 250 miles per hour, less than 50 feet off the ground, they now meet Gerstenberg's fearsome anti-aircraft defenses. Gun emplacements in flak towers fire. Ground sights aim point blank at the low-flying aircraft. The sides of haystacks fly open to reveal more guns. Shells rip the air. The gunners of the traveling circus are now trained level with German flak gunners in towers. Several B-24s are hit and crash, becoming flaming wrecks. Hell's winch takes 4 direct hits, the last in the cockpit area. Baker's stricken ship is still 2 minutes from the bomb release line. As they fly on, they pass over fields into which Hell's winch might ditch with ease. But Baker must lead his group to the target. Nothing will stop him. Just before they reach the first refinery, Baker's ship takes one more direct hit. No one can understand how it remains aloft. Baker now passes between the stacks of a huge refinery, and the rest of the traveling circus drop their bombs. Just past the target, incredulous crews watch as Hell's winch struggles to climb. Then the ship slams into the ground. Addison Baker had literally flown his ship to pieces, just to keep his promise to get the 93rd Bomb Group over the target. At that very moment, to the northeast of Ploiesti, Willie Steinman is circling with the rest of the Me-109s at 6,000 feet. So far, they have seen no furniture vans, Luftwaffe slang for B-24s. They are very near Ploiesti, the Americans' third IP. But the first American bombers have approached from a different direction and are under a cloud layer. When the word finally comes, Steinman and the others head for Ploiesti. They arrive in time to dive on the retreating traveling circus. But the attack does not go well for the Germans. Guns jam. Others pour fire into the bombers with no result. A B-24 gunner downs one fighter. Still, 2 B-24s are destroyed by the fighters. After a few more passes, the Germans break off. Luftwaffe controllers are calling. New waves of bombers are on the way in. The fighters pull up, regroup, and wait for word on the newcomers. A few miles away, another drama is playing out. Close to the original flight plan, John Palm and Brewery Wagon have closed on Ploiesti from the southwest. The bomber hugs the ground as they begin their impossible lone attack on Ploiesti's oil. From the plexiglass nose, navigator William Wright calls out oncoming trees and power poles. Palm hurdles them neatly. Mission planners had told the crewmen that German anti-aircraft guns would be virtually useless against low-flying aircraft. But they were wrong. From hundreds of guns, tracers rip the air in front of them. Small caliber hits come from all sides. But Brewery Wagon's gunners, trained to hit fast attacking aircraft, take their toll of the gun emplacements on the ground. Suddenly, a well-timed shell bursts in the nose of Brewery Wagon. The voices of William Wright and Bombardier Robert Merrill fall silent. The explosion takes out an engine and starts some interior fires. John Palm and co-pilot William F. Love try desperately to regain control as the ship lurches on. More shells hit in quick succession. Inside, John Palm is puzzled. He can't feel any back pressure from the right rudder pedal. He reaches down. His right leg has been nearly severed below the knee. The big ship is faltering badly. They will never be able to make their target. Reluctantly, Palm jettisons his load of bombs and turns away. In the sky above, Willie Steinman sees a lone B-24 struggling west from Ploiesti. He decides to give it a try and dives on Brewery Wagon. Steinman's bullets rip through Brewery Wagon. The effect is immediate. The ship goes down, plowing into the ground. The crippled John Palm and the remaining crew of Brewery Wagon somehow break free of the wreckage. Now, strangers on enemy ground. At Ploiesti, the Americans' third IP, the air is rent by rolling thunder as more than 300 radial engines pass 50 feet overhead. It is Killer Kane and the members of the remaining 3 bomb groups. Kane drives Hail Columbia hard and low. He sits hunched at the controls wearing a World War I helmet, an automatic pistol strapped to his hip. 77 Liberators follow as Kane now turns at the final IP for the bomb run on their assigned targets. On this heading, they are following train tracks that will lead them straight to Ploiesti's refineries. The long, rolling valley through which they fly becomes a tunnel of fire. Kane's crew shoot back with everything they've got, while Kane tries to maintain accurate formation flying. Suddenly, Kane comes face to face with one of General Gerstenberg's most diabolical defenses. Over an hour before, when previous sightings suggested the Americans' route, a special train constructed for just such an occasion was moved to these tracks. Now, as Kane's bombers overtake the train, which is running at top speed down the parallel tracks, specially adapted boxcars drop their sides and German shells spray all 5 rows of B24s on either side of the tracks. The Liberators return fire, disabling the train, but not before it inflicts mortal blows on several American bombers. Having cleared the main batteries of the anti-aircraft gauntlet, Kane and co-pilot John Young approach the refinery in which their target is located. It's nothing like they expected. In their bomb run, the remaining planes of Baker's traveling circus have already hit some targets assigned to Kane's pyramiders. The bombs already dropped by the lead groups were timed for delayed action from 5 minutes to several hours. Now, the first of these bombs are going off, potentially lethal to the low-flying pyramiders. Clouds of smoke engulf much of the target area, making it nearly impossible to navigate safely, much less see the target. Going by the book, if they cannot see their target, Kane's crew should turn back. But instead, Kane leads the pyramiders right into the dense clouds of black smoke. A flatbed takes out an engine. Kane rapidly feathers the prop while increasing power on the remaining 3 Pratt & Whitneys. Corker, the bombardier, reports that their target is imminent. Kane is flying as low and steady as he possibly can when Corker releases the bombs. The bombs fall on target. Inside Hail Columbia, the crew members cheer. Behind Kane, the remaining pyramiders release their bombs on their targets. They are the first group to successfully complete their mission as briefed. But before they leave the target area, one more surprise awaits. Flying as low as he dares, less than 100 feet off the ground, Kane is suddenly startled to see another Liberator emerge from the smoke, flying straight at him. With a hair's breadth to spare, the big bomber passes underneath Hail Columbia. It is one of the remaining Liberandos led by K.K. Compton. Finally realizing their wrong turn, they've come back to attack Ploiesti. But this puts them on a collision course with Kane's pyramiders. Miraculously, the planes manage to evade each other, passing dangerously above and below. German observers who see this from the ground are dumbstruck. With no other explanation conceivable, they accept the amazing interlace of American bombers as an intentional plan executed with incredible precision. As Kane and the pyramiders hurtle on beyond the target, the bomber ranks are thinning rapidly. Finally, they come out on the other side of the smoke and flame. Now, Me-109s fall on them from above. In one of these fighters is Willie Steinman, trying for his second kill of the day. Steinman picks a bomber from the first wave and begins his dive. Unlike his first kill, this craft is flying in formation. They're firing back at him. Willie can feel bullets from turret gunners ripping through his plane. As he comes closer, Steinman pulls back on his throttle and slows his descent with flaps. Each craft, bomber and fighter, sprays the other with bullets. Finally, as Steinman's engine flames, the bomber begins to fall. Steinman is going down fast, too. He knows his best chance is to be thrown free in the crash. Afterward, Steinman retains no memory of the impact. The first thing he remembers, he is seated on the ground with his pants torn and cuts on his legs. Nearby, both bomber and fighter lie burning. no one escapes alive from the bomber. Wilhelm Steinmann gets up and walks away. The remaining planes of Killer Kane's Pyramiders are now fighting their way desperately back out of Romania. One of the most damaged, Kane's own Hail Columbia, is slowly falling behind the others. Kane's gunners battle the German fighters. Hail Columbia suffers additional wounds, but the fighters are driven away. Knowing that he cannot make it back to Benghazi, Kane has his navigator set a new course for a British airfield on Cyprus. Hail Columbia is now producing an airspeed of only 135 miles per hour, close to stalling. To climb over the southern leg of the Balkans, Kane needs 6,600 feet of altitude. He orders his men to throw out everything that's not essential. As the damaged B-24 claws its way up the lowest pass in the Balkan mountains, Kane wants to know if they'll have enough altitude. The navigator can only guess. Guess hell, Kane howls. You'd better be right, or it'll be everybody's ass. The mountains are closing in on all sides now. With every possible bit of excess speed traded for altitude, Kane has no way to turn back. Finally, at the last moment, only a small updraft saves the ship. As Hail Columbia slips over the top, the tail gunner's voice is heard over the interphone. Killer, I swear I felt the belly scrape the mountain. When Kane finally reaches Cyprus, his battered plane will barely stay in the air. As Hail Columbia comes down on the runway, her front landing gear collapses. The plane slams to the ground, screeching along the tarmac. At last, the battered Liberator comes to a stop. Once safely out of the wreck, the crew of Hail Columbia kiss the ground in joyous relief. An RAF flight surgeon approaches the group. Apologizing for the inconvenience, he informs the battle-weary men that the mess hall is closed for the evening, but perhaps he could offer them something in town. After 13 of the roughest hours they have ever spent in the air, the crew of Hail Columbia, exhausted and numb, is treated to dinner by the RAF. In 280 BC, Pyrrhus, king of Epirus, routed the Roman cavalry with elephants, a sort of beast that some might say bears a distant resemblance to a B-24 Liberator. Pyrrhus won the battle, but at a great loss of his own men. One more such victory, he said, and we are lost. Thus was coined the term, a Pyrrhic victory. Ploiesti was officially claimed a victory by both the Americans and the Germans. But what had really happened? On the 1st of August, 1943, 1,765 crewmen flew in 178 B-24 Liberators. Through enemy action and other causes, 52 planes were lost. Of those that returned to Benghazi, no more than 30 were considered flyable. "310 Americans were killed, and many more remained prisoners for the duration of the war. Initial estimates were that the raid had destroyed 60% of Ploiesti's oil production. But in reality, within 2 months, Ploiesti was delivering more oil than ever before. Colonel Smart's revolutionary low-level tactics were not tried again. Killer Kane and John S. Young survived the war, as did most of their crew members. The bodies of Addison Baker, John Gerstad, and the rest of the crew of Hell's Wench were never recovered. The surviving members of John Palm's crew surrendered to the Romanians. Palm himself was placed in a civilian hospital where he later befriended the Romanian royal family. As a result, Palm was never officially jailed as a prisoner of war. Many of the downed crewmen received sympathetic treatment from the local population. 14 months later, after the Russians had driven the Germans from Romania, the prisoners were returned to American bases, free at last. Kane, Baker, Gerstad, and 2 others were awarded the Medal of Honor for their actions on August 1st, 1943. Medals were bestowed upon many other participants, including the 2 men responsible for the infamous wrong turn. Kane promoted by 1 grade virtually everyone under his command who had completed the mission. And the war went on. Yet in final judgment, the Pyrrhic victory and the achievement of the Ploiesti raiders must be measured not in results, but in courage. It was a mission flown by young men. Many were finishing their tour of duty and could soon expect to return to a homeland as yet untouched by the apocalypse. Yet they flew so that other, younger men might not have to. And when they came face to face with the enemy, even knowing that their best laid plans had come to naught, they refused to turn back. They did so not for certain victory, but because it might, just might, shorten this war.